So tell me about the speech that you have picked.
I picked a couple out
Yeah.
of East is East by
Mm.
Ayub Khan Din. You know, as a kid of Asian background born
Yeah.
here, with no sort of culture of going to the theatre,
Mm.
it really was television and films. In a way, because I already didn't fit in
Mm.
order to access those stories, to make them my stories, um, I had to take my kind of cultural heritage out of it.
Right. Okay.
And the useful thing about that was that suddenly, you know, things that may have been considered women's films, like Now Voyager or All About Eve,
Yeah.
suddenly ceased to be about the other because I
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
to connect with something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that then opened up everything. It was only until I saw East is East on stage that I saw something that resembled on stage in English a very, very personal experience. So that's why East is East, I think, was particularly important to me, because suddenly I saw something that I didn't have to exclude my cultural experience from
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
order to connect with it.
Why did these bits spring to mind? For people who don't know it, can you
Hmm.
just summarize what the play is about?
Yeah, it's about a family, the Khan family, who are
Hmm.
living in Salford, and the dad, who's called locally George,
Mm.
it runs a fish and chip shop,
Hmm.
and he married Ella, who is white, English,
Hmm.
local,
Hmm.
and they have 7 children. You know, the children are they want to keep their parents happy,
Yeah.
and within that is that George and Ella are so different. He is so rooted in the way that he was brought up,
Hmm.
and by the rules, social rules he was brought up with,
Mm.
and Ella is kind of different. To how do they please them both?
Where does the title come from?
I think it's something that my parents also used as well, which is
Oh,
to define the difference. It's East is East and West is West. You know, these things don't mix. Since the play is about mixing, about
yeah.
assimilating, and about trying to work out where you sit within it all,
Yeah.
that was a phrase that was kind of used quite a bit. I saw the play first, and so I had gone to a theatre writers workshop,
Hmm.
um, at which Ayub Khan Din was there,
Oh, amazing.
and he was talking about thinking about writing a play. I mean, he's a terrific actor as well, but he was thinking about writing a play based on his own experiences.
Yeah.
And I got chatting to him, and he kind of talked about the fact that his father was Pakistani, his mum was English,
Yeah.
he was one of 7 kids,
Right.
and then just related some of the world that
Hmm.
he'd grown up in Salford. And I remember thinking, when he was talking about it, I was thinking, wow, this is going to be great. But it felt like a series of sketches
Yeah.
because
Okay.
they were amusing and we were in a social situation.
Yeah.
And I think that when the play came out and
Hmm.
then subsequently the film, which did very well, um, it was far richer than that. And I think it was,
Mm.
you know, he managed to kind of have those elements of comedy and brutality and tragedy,
Mm.
and the feeling of being trapped, um, you know, in the space of this one play. And one of the perennial things for me, I mean, despite being born in West London
Mm.
and brought up here, uh, is that question of where do I fit in?
Hmm. Hmm.
Who's my people? Where
Mm.
is home for me?
Mm.
And it was the first play that I'd seen culturally that questioned that
Yeah.
or in, interrogated that in some way.
Yeah. You were there. You heard about East is East before East is East was
I
written.
mean, I have to pinch myself. I mean, I'm sure there were other plays that were written that tried to address those areas. I think that what made East is East important was
Hmm.
that it kind of crossed over to a mainstream audience. It ceased to be something incredibly niche. And that was down to the power of the writing, I think. And because Goodness Gracious Me happened around the same time, I think
Right.
first series on radio was 96 or 97. So it felt like it was also part of something. I think Bend It Like Beckham, the film, also
Right.
came out around that time. So it felt like there was a new British voice
Yeah.
that had,
Blooming.
that had managed to cross over and become
Yeah.
a British voice, as opposed to, well, this will just appeal to, you know, an Asian community or
Yeah.
a
Well, I heard
minority
you say
community.
in another interview once, you were talking about Goodness Gracious Me and sort of saying there was almost an expectation that the audience would only be people of that background, of either a multicultural background or an Asian background, and that actually really early on the audience numbers were so huge that you were looking at it going, okay, so this is clearly being watched by just everyone, which is great.
Yeah, or one Asian family.
Very good. I also want to ask you briefly about the speech you first wanted to talk about, which I sort of batted away because I was like, this is not theatre. But it's such a great idea. Can you tell everyone what the first speech was that you actually came to me with?
Yeah, it's the final speech by Charlie Chaplin in the film The Great Dictator. And I think it's quite a theatrical speech, actually, because it is a monologue. There were lots of interesting things about it. First of all, I watched it when I was very young. Secondly, about it itself is, you know, Chaplin is known for silent comedy.
Yeah.
And so this was his first, you know, feature-length talking film. And also he became, you know, one of the iconic images of the 20th century is Chaplin's Little Tramp. And this film, The Great Dictator, was the last time he played the Little Tramp character on screen.
Right.
And the whole film is about this a Jewish barber in Germany, Charlie Chaplin, in his little tramp guise, suddenly being mistaken for Adolf Hitler, or a Adolf Hitler-esque kind of character. And the very last speech is him talking to the massed crowds about how humanity is the most important thing. And, you know, we can't be swallowed up by mechanization and things that make our lives easier if we lose our humanity. Halfway through this speech, where he's addressing the crowds, he then just addresses the camera directly and just breaks the fourth wall and throws everything down as a personal plea. And I thought that was just extraordinary. I mean, Shakespeare is extraordinary, and I didn't get Shakespeare at all when I was a kid at school. And a couple of productions we went to were quite frankly awful. And I then saw Mark Rylance do Hamlet.
Great.
And apart from it being clear as to there was a story, there was actually a story there, and people weren't just kind of randomly putting words together and with pauses in between. That was an extraordinary experience. And then more recently, I suppose, than that, Othello with Adrian Lester was another incredible production. And it was when I finally saw productions and actors who could speak the lines as dialogue, suddenly all of it makes sense. And you can relate to it. It becomes about you at that point, as opposed to this otherness. Initially, because of the language, because of the meter, because of the stories themselves, it's absolutely nothing to do with my sort of, you know, background.
It's not comparable.
There's nothing that I could reach for.
You're not a Danish prince.
I could be. I could be.
You're not a fairy in the woods.
That I definitely have
sometimes.
And this is the thing about finding your tribe, is that your community. And it was only actually when I started acting and writing that I thought I found my community. People who are creative and open and looking to communicate and looking to connect. That's my people. It's not people who have a similar name or a similar background or a culture or whatever. You know, I regard you as part of my tribe.
I regard you as part of my tribe.
Oh, well, that's really lovely. Thank you.